Welcome back to Finding Your Shape for Ministry. Thank you so much for inviting us into your home tonight. I hope you're having fun discovering your unique design that God has created you to be, just to function and serve His special purposes for your life. Tonight, you're going to be receiving something like this as homework called your shape profile. And you're to take it home and put down those things that you have already discovered about yourself. It's going to be kind of like a spiritual resume. And you're going to be able to add in here those areas that you've already learned about yourself. For example, S is for spiritual gifts, and you're going to log in your spiritual gifts. H is for heart. What are your passions? If you could do anything you wanted to do and knew you couldn't fail, what would that be? We want you to write those down. A is your abilities. What abilities have you discovered about yourself that God has gifted you with very specifically? Those aren't by accident. God has a design for each and every gift that He's given to you. So tonight, we get to do something very special. We're going to be looking at your personality. Now, last week, you should have taken what is called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. And I hope that you took it and we were able to score it and send it back to your home so that you can follow along with me today. What we're wanting to do tonight is share with you a little bit about that Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, so you'll have a little bit more understanding about what we're talking about in regard to the findings in your particular personality. So let's just take a look at the slides for a while. Tonight, we're going to take a look a little bit deeper at your particular personality style. Now, as you know, there's many personality assessments out there today. And in fact, personality assessments have been around since the time of Socrates and Plato. In fact, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung took some of these original personality types and they began to work on some of their own. They too came up with 4 major types, and they discovered that if our basic needs in life are thwarted, we might become unhealthy mentally, as well as physically and emotionally. So it's very important for you to understand your type of personality and what your basic needs are in life so that you can meet them accordingly. You'll also find out how you mesh with other people, whether it be your spouse, your parents, your children. Knowing your personality is a great thing for you because it will help you get along with other people. Remember, there are no right or wrong personalities as we go through this tonight. You are unique as your fingerprints. And while we're looking at 4 major types, there's actually a combination of over 16 variables here and 16 very different types of ways of looking at things. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. First of all, when you took that test or assessment, it wasn't a test. When you took the Myers-Briggs assessment, you were looking at 4 different basic continuums. The first one is something that everyone is very accustomed to today. It's called the extrovert-introvert scale. Some of you are very extroverted, like myself. You like to be around people and you enjoy the outer world of people. Versus on the other end of the continuum is the introvert. The introverted person is more reserved and they prefer the inner world of ideas. It's the difference between one person who's an extrovert who enjoys going out to a party versus the introvert who enjoys just having another couple over for dinner. Both have very different ways of dealing with people. Both are fine. Both are needed in our society. So there isn't a right or a wrong. Introverts aren't better than extroverts. Extroverts aren't better than introverts. It's just who we are and it's our makeup. And we are extroverted on a certain level and introverted on a certain level. But the key in all of these you will see on these continuums is to be centered as much as possible. You don't want to be like I was when I first took this test at 17 and found out that I was completely extroverted and I wasn't even over on the introverted scale whatsoever. And over time, I had to learn to be more calm and reserved. That took a lot of doing for those of you who know me. Don't laugh out there. I see you. But anyways, as I took the test over the years, I became a little bit more on the introverted side, but I was still primarily an extrovert. That is something else you need to be aware of in regard to your personality. Basically, God has created you to be who you are, and you're primarily going to have that inclination to be that way for the rest of your life. Can you change? To a degree, but honestly, I'm going to be an extrovert all of my life. No matter what I try, I'm always going to be more outgoing than I am reserved. That's just who I am, and that's okay. It's the same thing with you. You may be much more reserved, and that's okay. But again, our key in looking at these personality continuums is that if we really want to be like Jesus, we'd be right down the middle. So let's take a look at the next scale. The next two scales, in fact, are the way we take in information, process it in our brain, and then share it with others. The first continuum of how we take information into our brain, there's a scale from sensing for the S to intuitive with the N. Now, the sensing individual is someone who likes to take everything into their brain purely factual. It's what we might term concrete evidence. We often say that children are concrete thinkers, meaning they will share with you exactly what they see. And as we get older, some people prefer that means of taking information in. Other people, as they get older, become much more intuitive. This is a person that not only takes in the facts, but they look beyond the facts. They look to see what could be behind the facts. And so instead of just looking at a person's body language, for example, and seeing someone smile, they might ask, well, what are they really smiling about? And that would be the intuitive person. The concrete individual would just say, oh, that's a nice smile. It's two different ways of looking at information in general. And you will see this in life. You may be highly factual and you just want to get the facts and that's all you care about. Others of you are highly intuitive and you want to get behind the meaning of the facts. The intuitive people are often what we say are more global in their thinking, and the sensing people are more concrete in their thinking. And so this is just a way of taking information into the brain. Now, the next scale that you were looking at is called T versus F, or tough-minded, analytical, critical thinking people versus those who are highly friendly and cooperative and feeling-based. Again, this is the way we deal with the information that's come into our brains. So, for example, the high T is highly analytical. They're not really taking into consideration relationships or how people feel about the facts that they've taken in. They just simply want to do the right thing with those facts accordingly. And they're highly objective people. On the other end of the spectrum are those people who are much more concerned with how people feel about those facts and how people react to those facts. And they're very sensitive type of people. We often term the high feelers as very cooperative and social type of individuals versus the high T, highly analytical, highly objective individuals. Again, both are needed in society. One is not right, the other wrong. They're both different. However, if you find yourself, in terms of the points that are given on one scale or the other, if you find yourself pegging, as we would say, as a high T or a high F, we might do better to learn how to come more to center. My husband and I are a wonderful example of that. In this particular scale, I was a high T, my husband a high F. But as we came together as partners, we began to learn from each other. I learned that I needed to be a little bit more sensitive to the feelings of others when I made decisions regarding those facts. He learned how to be a little bit more analytical and objective in dealing with certain relationships. As the Bible says, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And this is what we find when we look at our personalities. But if we don't understand personalities, I could have said that my husband got on my nerves because he was too sensitive to things. And he could say that I got on his nerves because I was constantly disregarding people's feelings. In reality, we're not trying to hurt each other. It's just the way we operate in life. And as we understand one another, we get along better and we learn to rely on each other to learn how to better handle relationships. And so that is why we're doing this. This final scale is how we see the world in general. Do we perceive the world as black and white, cut and dry? That would be the J person. The person that likes to plan ahead and schedule everything. And we use the term judging. Not that they're judging other people, but just that they're very defined in the decisions they make, and they make very quick decisions. On the other end of the scale is P, or a person who's highly perceptive or more probing in life. They're more subjective and they like to be more spontaneous. They don't necessarily see the world as black and white, but a lot of gray in between. And so they're more flexible. Oftentimes people enjoy being around a person who is a high P versus a high J. But we need those high J's to keep us on target and to keep us scheduled and planned in terms of where we're going. When we put all four of these categories together, we come up with a certain personality type. Right now, what I'm going to give you is an overview of some of those various types so that you can kind of see how they look in your particular group. David Kersey specifically came up with what he called the Kersey sorter, and he actually has a book called Please Understand Me. He actually has two books, and you'll be getting a handout tonight where you can look some of this up if you like and do more study on it. But he has a whole chapter on each of these 16 various personality types. And so here, for example, are the four major types that emerge. The first one is what we call the S.P. If they're a high S and a high P, you got a score in each of these four areas. Take a look at your scores and you will see under the S versus N if you're higher or lower. If you're higher, then you would put S. And at the last one, J versus P, if you were higher with the P, you would put P. The SPs are what we call the artisans. The SJs, we call the guardians. The NTs, we call the rationals. And the NFs, we call the idealist. Now, these are four general categories, but you will put your own flavor to each of these categories because of the other areas in the continuum that you are operating within. So let's take a look at how these 16 personality types vary. We're not going to go over all 16, but let's take a look at the four major ones tonight. The artisan, for example, by definition, artisans are great people. By the way, your pastor is an artisan. These are what we call sensation-seeking personalities. They love to be at the center of things. They tend to be a little impulsive and they love risk and chance. They're innovative and they're very creative, highly perceptive. They love to have fun and make people happy. They make up approximately 35 to 45% of our society. Most often they're seen in the public eye as performers and composers. Their strengths include the ability to be highly charismatic and aesthetically they're involved in the arts. They're very hard workers, extremely persistent. They don't like to give up. And overall, they're very good problem solvers. You can already see why some of these basic personality characteristics would be good for a pastor and why maybe God created him in this way. And you, if you're an SP. Remember how at the beginning we talked about Carl Jung said that every personality type had a basic need in life? Well, the artisans love freedom. They want the freedom to create. and to make new things and to have the freedom to incorporate new ideas. And so if you are an artisan, just keep that in mind. Their time frame also, very importantly, is really the here and now. They don't really look to the past. They're not so concerned with the future as other personality types are, but they're very concentrated, on the here and now. Right here, right now, this is what we need to do. The next personality type that I want to take a look at are the S.J.s, or the guardians. They're given the term guardians because they're determined to watch over our society. So we call them the guardians of our society. They have a very strong sense of duty. They carry on traditions, highly systematic, very much concrete thinkers. They're able to manipulate large amounts of details. Very supportive, very cautious, very judicious or fair, highly loyal, very organized, and have a well-established concern about the shoulds and oughts in this world. If you find yourself as a guardian saying, I should be doing this or you ought to be doing that, you're probably a guardian for sure. You make up 45% of the population, and your strengths include being highly responsible and extremely reliable, with a well-defined moral sense to do the right thing. Overall, you are definitely the watchdogs of our societal institutions. The guardians find themselves pretty much in most societal institutions, such as hospitals, police departments, fire departments, schools, universities. Your best teachers are typically S.J.s or guardians. And if you want to know what your basic need is, it's for harmony and belonging. You have a desire to be part of something. And your time frame oftentimes is the future. You love to plan, you love to schedule things and look ahead at what's coming up and making sure that everyone's on time to get where they need to go. The guardians are great people, just like the artisans, and we need them all. Our next personality type are the NTs, or the rationals. Now, the rationals were given that title for a very specific reason, because they're highly objective. They are what we call the knowledge seekers in our society. They desire to solve the mysteries of life. They're natural-born leaders. They're a little skeptical, a little detached emotionally, and they have a strong will and an independent will, but they're very efficient, very competent. They like to be in control, and they like to master new things. They're very deliberate thinkers. They have long-range views, and they tend to challenge the established ways of doing things to set up more efficient systems. Your rationals make up only 3 to 6% of the population, which makes sense. We don't need lots of chiefs. We always need what? More Indians than we do chiefs, as they say. And so the natural-born leaders make up approximately only 3 to 6%. So if you don't meet a lot of them, that's why. Their strengths include the ability to frame what people say in a very logical fashion. They look at the big picture, and they have a strong desire to be the very best in their field, and they typically are. They have a basic need for competence and power to do the job they feel called to do. And their time frame are intervals of time, which is very interesting because the leaders or the rationals are able to detach from one time setting to another to really focus on that particular thing that they're working on. So if you're a rational and you don't see a lot of other people like you, this is why. There's just not a lot of you around. Our next personality type are the NS, or better known as the idealist. The idealists are great people too, and you're going to see why. We define the idealists as identity seekers or gardeners of the soul. They are very people-oriented, and they look for the meaning of life. They see the potential in themselves and others, and they have a very ethical and sensitive and responsive personality. They're highly feeling-prone. They desire unity and uniqueness, truth and integrity, and honesty, and they have also a hunger for romance. If you're a romantic, you're probably an NF. But if you're a NF, you probably hear yourself saying, just be real. You don't like fake people. You want people to be who they say they are. You have a very strict sense of identity and self and integrity. You only make up, again, 10 to 15% of the population. And your strengths include the desire to bring out the best in others. And that's why people like you. Because you're that guy that is so encouraging and uplifting, everybody loves to be around you. You have extremely good interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. Not only do you get along with other people very well, but you also have a good sense of who you are. And when you become a Christian, you have a great intrapersonal relationship with the Lord, a very spiritual person at heart. You also have a very special vision of the world, and you want to help people fulfill their potential. That makes you very unique because not everyone is so concerned about other people. But for you, it comes naturally. This is how God created you. You're probably a very good counselor, for example. Your basic need, Your personal need is personal authenticity. You want people to be real. And you need and have a desire to be real yourself. And if you find yourself in a setting or a relationship or a job where you can't be yourself, you're going to be very, very frustrated and perhaps even get depressed and upset. So make sure that you're real in your own skin, so to speak. And this is very important for you to understand. You tend, as a romanticist, to look more, though, at the past. You often find yourself saying, oh, look at the good old days. Weren't they the best? So sometimes you've got to be hooked up with someone who's looking a little bit more forward and keeping your feet on the ground. But we love the NFs. Overall, personality types affect your interpersonal relationships. In the words of John Maxwell, we're to seek to understand rather than to be understood. This is our goal in terms of understanding our own personality so that we can seek to understand others. Too often, we find ourselves, instead of understanding others, trying to make them into something else. But remember this, we are to seek to understand others for who they really are and not what we would like for them to become. Remember, God created you very uniquely and He creates everyone around you just as uniquely. Come to appreciate them instead of trying to change them. That's what personality understanding is all about. And I hope that you've learned something here tonight, especially about children. For those of you who have families, I refer to you again another great quote from Max Lucado, a wonderful pastor, who said that children are not a piece of clay to be molded, but rather a book to be read. As we watch our children's personalities unfold in front of us, that is so exciting. The same thing in a relationship of a husband and wife or a friendship. Don't try to make people into something they're not. Simply appreciate them for who they are. Love them as they are, for that's what God does with us. I hope you've enjoyed this evening. May you have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next week.